everyone. Welcome to the second Oceanside chat of the Q1 series for 2023. I'm super happy to have you guys join us. We are very fortunate to have a repeat offender, Jonah Midanik. He has, Midanik. I've always said Midanik, and that's not right. It's Midanik. I'm going to say it right this time. Second time's the charm. A little bit about him. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's been building companies in Canada and the US for the last 20 years. Don't let the baby face fool you. He is doing it, and he's been doing it a long time. He knows startups in and out from a variety of perspectives. He's a successful bootstrap founder and CEO, and he's also launched new corporate divisions for companies like BigCo and Limelight. And now he spends most of his time helping companies grow at Forum Ventures, formerly a Cell Prize, as the COO and general partner, and he hails all the way from Toronto. Super happy to have you. I can't believe you're back. Please keep coming back. Your last Oceanside chat, as I mentioned in the email that I sent out as a reminder for everybody, is such a hit. It's been a hit. We talk about wow moments all the time. In fact, it's part of my founder circle onboarding process. When teams come in, I have them watch your video, and then I ask them, what's your product wow moment? So you've made such an impact to our teams at the Garage. We're so grateful to have you. Passing the mic. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks so much for the warm intro. And first of all, thanks everyone. I know everyone here is insanely busy wherever you are on that entrepreneurial journey. Time is at an absolute premium. So first off, thank you for spending it with me and us. I'm going to share my screen. And what I'm going to talk to you guys about today is a topic that founders ask me about, kind of literally all the time, which is fundraising. So, search, one sec. Yeah, so you've got a little intro on me, but what I will say is, in addition to that, at Forum, we invest in early stage companies, usually software companies, but we're the first check in almost always. So in the last couple of years that I've been here and helping run the fund, we've invested in a couple hundred companies and taken them to market for pre-seed, seed, and Series A rounds. So I've gotten to see a ton of entrepreneurs go through this process. And also I went through this process myself as the founder and CEO of Limelight, where I raised, a pretty significant amount of venture capital. So first off, I'd love for this to be highly interactive. If you've got a question, shout it out. Unfortunately, I won't be able to see it. So Natalie, if you see something, please feel free to chime in. I think that's really helpful if we answer questions kind of during. And I'll kind of go from there. So with that said, fundraising is really, really hard. It was hard before, and this market's even harder. And it's hard for like a whole bunch of reasons, right? Doing it is hard. It's this really vulnerable, difficult thing where you put your all into it. And the way the system is set up is you're going to hear no a lot of times from a lot of people, and that's if you're successful. So it's really, really hard. So what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to give you the inside tips from the other side of the table as to what goes into a great pitch. Because a great pitch makes it so much easier to fundraise for a variety of different reasons that we'll get into. So first off, here's a really inconvenient truth that's hard for people fundraising and founders to hear. And that inconvenient truth is at the earliest stages, value is entirely arbitrary. So what does that mean? It means that basically the value of your company is entirely made up. When you see people raising pre-seed and seed rounds at $5 million, $8 million, $10 million, think about what like $10 million buys you in real life. You can buy like 4 houses, nice ones, you know what I mean? Or like 10 houses, depending where you live. Like that's like a huge sum of money. So how's it possible these 1- and 2-year-old companies that barely have customers are worth that much money? And it's because you and your company are not worth its underlying intrinsic value. You are worth what the market perceives your value to be. Because your intrinsic value, if you actually look at the technology, even if you have patents, there's no way that patent portfolio is worth anywhere near that. So you're worth the perception of your value, which actually means that the goal of fundraising is actually to build perceived value of your business. because it's not really about the underlying business itself. And that's really, really hard for founders to hear, because you wake up, and if you're like me, then every day you like wake up and, in the shower, you're thinking about your business and you're thinking about how to like get customers, and that there's a disconnect there, because that's actually not what fundraising is. Fundraising is not the fundamentals of your business at early stage. Fundraising is building perceived value of your company. And once you start thinking about it that way, well, then what we need to do actually changes. Okay, so that makes sense. All right, value's kind of made up. We all kind of know that. There's no real way to evaluate an early stage business, which is why valuations are all over the place. So that's fine. So then what makes up perceived value? Unfortunately, first and foremost, the biggest thing that makes up what VCs think of your company is what other VCs think of your company. For those of you that have ever been out fundraising, one of the first questions you get is like, who else is in this round? Who else is interested? We call this heat. And it's unfortunate because you'd think VCs, this group of like alleged innovators who are supposed to be so disruptive thinkers, but the truth is VCs at their core basically just finance people. And so what the market thinks about you is actually going to matter a lot. So that's one piece. The second is perception of your market. Some markets are weak, some markets are hot. And that's kind of unfortunate, because if you see a big problem in what is perceived to be a weak market, you're still going to try and solve it. But we need to be aware of that and have answers for that. Perfect example, if you're raising in generative AI right now, that's much easier. If you're raising in, say, crypto right now, that's a lot harder. But 2 years ago, that would have been really different. So you need to understand where you fit into all of that, because we're building perceived values. The perception of your market matters. The perception of your team and traction, these are like actual things that are actually in your business. The perception of those things is going to matter a lot. So our job is to highlight the things within your team and traction that are going to yield the best perception. So what is it about you and your story and what your business is doing that actually build perceived value in your business? Another one, and this is a big one that a lot of people leave out, and this is the big idea factor. I know it sounds ridiculous, but the truth of the matter is VCs are looking for billion-dollar businesses. And so if you don't explain your business with a big idea behind it, it's very difficult for them to imagine what you look like at $1 billion. And again, I know that's so silly because we're at this early stage, this fragile point. So how can you talk like that? But the truth is you have to. There has to be a way that we can see that your business gets very, very big. And then the last one is just simply how well you package yourself, your presentation layer. Is your deck well designed? Are you even just like your Zoom background? Are you well lit? Can we hear you? All of that stuff. How well is your email written? All of that stuff shouldn't matter very much, but that's all we have to go on. So it actually matters a great deal. So what we're going to work on today is how do we make up some of the perceived value in our business? Okay, so what's the starting point? Well, the starting point, think about it. If you're meeting a VC you don't know, the first thing they almost always ask for is your pitch deck. So your pitch deck is kind of that like open door, first handshake, first date, whatever analogy you want to use. The pitch deck is your chance to cover off most of these elements and build that heat that results in successful raises. A good pitch deck gets you orders of magnitude more meetings than not a good one. And this is a numbers game. Raising money is a sales process, right? You're going to talk to all these VCs and eventually you only need one to say yes, but one has to say yes. So the more meetings we can get, the more partner conversations we can get, the better off your chances of doing it. And the more excitement we can generate using this tool, the better off we are. This is the single biggest thing we can do to generate meetings and heat in your business. Any questions to this point?
I just have a comment. I mean, what you were saying about, the elements of how it's perceived. Sometimes I hear things, and actually Dave Eastman just joined, the director of the Garage. Hey, Dave. He mentions all the time, like it's the small things about a pitch deck that can really turn off certain investors, like whether or not you're using like a black background versus a white background. And considering the fact that like perhaps it's hard for people to see certain colors and it just can become frustrating to experience the pitch deck in that way, which can probably be pretty frustrating to a founder who's putting their heart and soul into this business. And it seems so trivial, but at the end of the day, you're building relationships. You need to meet those people where they are, not the other way around.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like one of the things I circulate to all my founders is an article by Tom Ford about how to look good on Zoom. And it's stupid because how you look and what your lighting is should have no impact on whether or not you fundraise. But this is real life and it does. So as stupid as it is, I tell my founders to, Tom Ford knows a lot about lighting. You should listen to him. So fully agreeing there. Okay, so here's the single biggest thing to know about the pitch deck. Yes, it's the sum of a bunch of small things. But the biggest thing is a deck is not a collection of disjointed pieces of information. It's a story. We are telling a story. We're telling a story that's building perceived value. You are telling a story about how you started this company that is a great candidate for investment because it's going to return a lot of money. So it's not a collection of like, here's 10 slides, slide 6 is traction. Traction is obviously going to be a part of your story, but the thing needs to flow as a story. And I'll get into what that actually means, but this is the biggest error I actually see across the board, which is just a bunch of disjointed information. But that's actually not how VCs talk about companies. When I get off the phone with the founder, my partners say, what does that company do? I'm like, oh, they're disrupting this by doing this to hope to get to this result. It's a story. And that story needs to come through. And the more organic and authentic it is to you, and the more it's built around building the perceived value in your business for a VC, the better off you'll be. So narrative is everything, right? We're trying to build this perceived value in our business. We're going to use the pitch deck as the front door, first date, first handshake, again, first impression, whatever mental model you want to use for that. But a successful pitch deck is a clear story that tells any investor without any additional information why you and your team are building a company that's going to get to $100 million in revenue within 7 years. That is true for all venture capitalists. This is what they look for. If we can't see a clear path to $100 million and beyond, but a minimum $100 million, then it is not venture backable. So you don't need to try not to make us look for it. You're telling a story about like, I'm doing X and it's going to get to this results and here's why. Without that clear story and path, you are unlikely to raise venture capital. This is always true. And I'm going to walk through exactly how that actually all works and give you tactical advice on like how we do that. Okay, so we've learned or we're refreshed that we know that we're trying to build perceived value in our business. That makes a ton of sense. We've heard that storytelling is everything. Okay, that makes sense. Narrative is the key to storytelling. Yeah, that checks out. Okay, so we're trying to tell this $100 million revenue story, but we're so early in our journey, so that's really, really hard. And there's lots of ways to do it, just like there's lots of ways to tell stories. There's lots of ways to tell this story, and you're going to find the one that is yours. But here's some rules that should almost always be followed. So number one, build a case. If you say it, prove it. VCs hear a lot of wild claims. And so what that means is if you're making an assertion in anything you're doing in a pitch deck, you need to prove it using either third-party information or some sort of validation that's not you. Of course you believe it. You're the founder. The founder always believes in their vision. Why else would you give up your life for this really, really, really hard path? You wouldn't do that. It's like sometimes I'll have someone tell me like the market is $100 trillion or whatever the number is. That's not really helpful. What is helpful is saying a McKinsey study says that $38 billion will be spent on this problem this year. That's an example of building the case. So always build your case. It's the easiest way to build credibility. And to Dave's point about it's a summation of small things, that's one of the small things, just like design, just like lighting, that shows you're quote unquote on it and you're a strong founder and you get it. There's no one thing, but the summation of those things build strength throughout your narrative. So we're going to pay lots of attention to those little things, but one of them is build a case. If you're giving a market size, show me how. If you're making we're the only people that can do this, tell me why. Make a case. People are buying this over the competitor, then tell me what a customer said. You're always going to want to build the case. The second is vision matters. The truth is, for any early stage business, and I'll define that as any Series A and below business, you're still at the very early stages of your business. And that's okay. Every business on Salesforce started from zero. So did Microsoft. Like, every business starts somewhere. And that's totally great. I mean, that's my favorite stage of businesses. But it's so much easier to fundraise with a big idea. To give you the example, for those of you following the FTX fraud and saga, we all kind of laugh when, we get the transcript and Sam Bankman-Fried tells Sequoia, I want one day for people to be able to buy a banana on FTX. And the partners are like, I love this founder. And it sounds ridiculous because it's ridiculous. But the point is that there's a big idea there. And the big idea was, this is a new form of money with a basically infinite market size. And so while that big idea in hindsight sounds laughable, you need to figure out what your big idea is. Because right now, your MVP and your MVP plus a couple features is still just a wedge. And what we need to figure out is how that wedge turns into a massive platform in software terms, or whatever it is, or big distribution if you're B2C, whatever your thing is, it needs to feel big, because venture is about big $100 million revenue outcomes. And if you can't articulate that in 2 or 3 sentences, you need to figure out how. The other thing is, so we're going to build a case. We're going to talk about vision. Strengths first. VCs according to DocSend's data, and DocSend has a lot of data, VCs spend less than 3 minutes on average reading a deck, and that's for all their read-throughs. First reads get about 98 seconds. So think about how much you can read in 98 seconds. They're skimming it. That's the reality. You wish with you putting your heart and soul on the line, that wasn't true. The data is the data. They're not reading these things properly. So you need to hook me. Why am I reading this? If you start by saying like, we have 1 million customers, amazing. I, did this other thing, great. What is the thing that is really strong that you're going to lead with that is making us interested to slow down and actually listen? Any questions on these ones? I can't see anyone, so we're just gonna have to shout it out if you do.
Jonah, I have a question.
Yes.
What if you're like entering a recently kind of like a market space that's taken a hit or a downturn? You didn't expect that to happen, right? Like, so for instance, let's like e-commerce is a perfect example. Where like people are a lot more timid to invest in that area just because it's pretty tumultuous, or even like Web3, like that's kind of like as it goes up and down of interest and understanding, like people are wanting to and then not wanting to invest. Would you say that when you're building a case, like to avoid trying to make a case for things that are volatile, like kind of just avoid having it in your deck entirely, or should you do your part to kind of assuage concerns or fears? What would you say is the best thing in a deck?
Yeah, so it really depends, but that's a good point. You can't just totally ignore it, right? Like if you're building a blockchain business right now, then it is what it is, right? And that's unfortunate timing. But I know I was trying to raise money as a MarTech founder in 2014 when MarTech was a dirty word. So what I did is I tried to shift it from being a MarTech company. And I used to lead off my decks with the sentence that, I'd lead it off with a stat that like millennials and below value experiences over all else. This isn't a MarTech company. This is the future of the experience economy, and tried to recast it in that way. That's one way you can do it. The other way you can do it is it's always good to just put in a why now and just acknowledge it. Like e-com is falling, but that makes what we do even more important because this is the value we generate for our customers. These are the customers that love it. Everyone has to remember when you read all these like funding is down, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It just means it's happening less. So you got to find your way to navigate around that part of the story. Completely ignoring what and who you are is obviously, the VCs know, like if it's e-com, it's e-com. So what you need to do is figure out in your narrative, and we'll get to that, why you, why now, and the rules are basically the same. It's just harder.
Got it. Okay, we have 2 hand raises. I'm gonna go with Emma. Emma, go for it.
Hi, thank you. I have a question about the strengths first, and that relates to the order of the pitch deck. So for example, I'm currently building a startup in fashion AI. So a lot of things, the problem we solve is about the fashion retail industry, and it's have a little business. So we currently don't have a customer yet, so we cannot say we have 100 million users, but we have a strong team. So in terms of order, how did you order the team, the business plan, the product solution, if the team is strong at this stage, but our product is still at very early?
Awesome. I literally have a couple slides that deal with this direct question because it's a phenomenal one. So let me cover that there because it's such a great question. How do I build my story around strengths? Every business at your stage has weaknesses. Think about it. Even the biggest businesses in the world, does everyone know like Tesla's weaknesses, Apple's? Those are, monstrous businesses that have weaknesses. So your business does too. So we're going to lead with strength, and I'm going to show you specifically how to do that in the next little bit. Great question.
One more question from Greg. Go for it.
Yeah, I was just wondering, in reference to the build a case section, you talked about having outside proof, and I was wondering how you felt about having customer discovery interviews or takeaways from them, at least in that section, or if that's too close to like you as a founder or
no, that's great. That's third party. Why did they buy it? Yeah, it's someone else saying it. It's great, perfect. Head of engineering at Twilio. Like, that's awesome. You know what I mean? Like, that's someone who's not you saying it's great.
Okay.
Yeah, that's enough. And sometimes, by the way, it's just going to be math. Like if it's market sizing and, Deloitte hasn't done a study on your market size, you can literally just be like, look, McKinsey says there's, 85,000 piano tuners in America, and each piano tuner is going to pay us $100 a month. VCs respect math. They're finance guys. They know how to read a spreadsheet.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
All right. So we've covered off some things, right? We've said we're building perceived value into our business. We said we're building a story. We've got a couple rules, right? Like build a case, lead with strength, make sure you've got a big idea. Okay, that all makes sense. Great. But how do I actually do that? It was a great question I just got. And the question I, as a founder, always used to have like, cool, these rules are great, but what do I actually do now? Okay, how to do it. Awesome. This is, in my view, and what I teach literally 100 companies a year, how to build a pitch deck. Step 1, pick a narrative framework. A narrative framework is a story arc. There's lots of great story arcs, right? Like for those of you that studied literature, there's like the classic tragedy framework. Those are all in literature, right? There's these classic narrative frameworks. There's a bunch of narrative frameworks that work for startups also. So you're going to pick a narrative framework that makes the most sense for your business. And I'm going to walk through what that means. But really at its core, instead of a collection of slides, we're going to say, how are we telling our story first and foremost? Because story is what we care about. So once we picked a narrative framework, and again, I'm going to go in detail into each of these things, so do not worry. We're going to build the case. So we're picking a story arc, and then we're actually going to prove it. It's a little bit like the 9th grade essay where you write like your topic sentence and then you prove it. And we've like our 3 cases that prove the thesis. That's kind of what we're doing here. The next thing we're going to do is check the boxes. There's a bunch of boxes that VCs want checked in a pitch deck. No one ever tells you what they are, but they do exist. I'm going to walk through what they are. And then the last thing we're going to do is iterate relentlessly. Whatever you do first is not going to be good enough. Not because you're not great, but because it's literally impossible to just like magically make a pitch deck the first time with no feedback and be awesome. So when you get the same question over and over again, that's someone telling you like, hey, we're not answering this. Or if someone's pushing back on the same thing over and over again, well, that's something you got to iterate on. Okay, awesome. So narrative frameworks. So there's a ton of narrative frameworks, and I'm going to go through a bunch of them. But pick a framework that best frames the why and the why now you are the right team to on. There's a million choices to do this with. But what is the thing that tells the story of your future? Again, remembering that the narrative arc is we're building this thing and here's a clear path to why we're going to win at $100 million in revenue. There's a lot of these that look backwards, like the, 2 guys starting Apple in a garage narrative. Yours has to be forward looking, which is definitionally harder. but that is what a great pitch deck does. Because people are people and VCs are people and everyone thinks in stories. We just do. Okay, so great. What does that actually mean? What does it mean? What is a narrative framework in the context of a pitch deck? What are we actually trying to do? So I'm gonna give you a couple examples. There's some examples here. So society is changing. So the one, obviously that was most common 2 years ago was like, the pandemic has impacted everything. But really what we're trying to do here is we're going to talk about a societal change. And then we're going to talk about the impact of that change. And because of the impact of this change, it creates some white space. And here's our vision to fix that. And here's the market size it creates. And here's our insight that tells us we're going to win. This is what we actually built. This is our traction. This is our team. So an example of this might be, what's a big societal change? Okay, so the bill that just passed with all that money going into climate change infrastructure, right? Just passed not so long ago. It's now being implemented. It's billions and billions of dollars flowing into these areas. So if you were building a company in this area, you could just be like, we all know climate change is a huge problem. The Biden administration and the US government has passed this bill and $30 billion is about to flow into these kind of technologies. There's this huge white space because no one's thinking about this one thing, but we did. Our vision is to, capture carbon and put it in warehouses in Northwest Oklahoma or whatever you're doing. And by doing this, we can seize, 15% of this $200 billion market. And the way we're going to win is no one's thinking about this one thing that we thought about that's way better. And by the way, here's how we're going to do it. Here's the thing we built. And not only is it awesome, but it's so awesome that the University of Oklahoma is already using it. And we're going to win because we're a team of chemical engineers from MIT or USC in this case, right? So that's an example of a societal change. Another one is like, if you're a team that had an aha moment, so you could lean it, I could start this off and be like, hi, my name's Jonah. And when I founded my last company, I realized that no one knew how to do pitch decks and that was costing founders tens of billions of dollars. That was the impact of this thing. My vision is to build a SaaS platform where you input your things and it automatically spits out a pitch deck for you. Pitch decks for all in the click of a button. I built it using, ChatGTP and Canva's new generative AI, and it creates there's 100 million people looking to raise money every year. It creates a $10 billion market. And by the way, I already have 80 customers. That would be an example of a eureka moment. Again, I'm leading with strength. In that one, I think the strength is myself and the core moment. In the other one, I think the strength is there's this huge societal change. There's this jump ball for all this government money to do all these amazing things. Another one is if you've got great traction. So again, leading with strength for a VC, it's like in just 6 months post-launch, we have engineers from the following companies using our platform. And then you've logos of 30 companies. Why are they doing that? They're all doing that because they were having trouble integrating large language models using available SDKs or whatever. Our vision is to change that. We're going to be the one-click solution that blah, 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 blah. How do we achieve that vision? With our first of its kind platform that does this thing. Here's why they love it. And then to the question I got earlier, we love it, Twilio. And it's not just these 30 companies. There's 200,000 more like them, each of which is willing to pay us $12,000 a month, creating a $7 billion a year opportunity. And why are the team to do it? We struggled with our problem ourselves. Those are just 3 examples. But if you'll notice, those are stories. They're really easy to remember. They actually cover off everything you need to cover off. They're easier to talk through. And they sound organic, because one of the other problems is when you're pitching, it's always awkward. You don't want to be awkward. You want to seem to Dave's point about the little things adding up. You being comfortable tells a VC you're comfortable in really high stress business situations, which is what we want out of our founder CEOs. So I'm going to pause here. Any questions on kind of narrative frameworks and what that actually means?
Can you talk more about the eureka moment?
Sure. So the eureka moment can be a lot of things, right? It could be an angle that no one else is seeing. So you could be attacking a market and like there's a bunch of other players where you're just like everyone's doing it wrong because the way to do it is actually this. It could be you've got a technical solve that's non-obvious. Let's say you've got a patent and you're like, I am the only person whose AI can detect method off-gassing at wellheads. And the reason why is because we solved this machine learning challenge that no one else knows, right? Or it could be that you saw a gap in the market that no one else did. What these are usually is either a deep technology team that solved something or something that you solved from past experience. So like we've got a platform that we just invested in that is doing caregiver care for people with dementia. And they had a really sad situation where they were dealing with a family member and they just realized how screwed up it was. And they were sitting there being like, I had to call 8 people, 7 organizations. There was no single source of truth for any of this. And I was sitting there being like, there's a better way. That was that team's aha moment. It's the core insight that drives most of the value in your business.
I often think of those types of founders. We have one specifically in the garage right now is like accidental founders. At least that's what she calls herself, because you've experienced a problem so significantly in your own work that you just can't stand it and you have to do something about it and you realize what you need to do and you just like to become an entrepreneur, which really I think helps to validate you in, when you are fundraising.
Yeah, and it's a story you can tell from the first person. Societal change is really like there's a lot of money flowing into space, so there's a change we all recognize, right? Like falling birth rates or whatever. There's a lot of them, right? Society, AI, like there's a lot of changes happening all the time, and it answers the why now. Same thing. This one's a traction one. Any other? I mean, I have others, right? So that I call this one the Tony Stark, right? Like all of a sudden we can create this power source that fits in the palm of your hand, and here's what that means, and here's the market it creates. That's if you've got a big technology solve, or if you built something really unique. And the other one is if you're in a massive market, if you're building in like a well-acknowledged huge space, you could just be like, look, like we're chasing this monstrous market. VCs love that. Here's why we think we've got a unique wedge into this monster market. Here's our vision for this monster market. Here's how we're building it. Here's the team to do it. Here's how we're doing. But then you have to acknowledge the competition if it's like a monstrous market. So again, I'll use the generative AI example. If you were building like a generative AI thing for marketing, it is clearly demonstrably a monstrous market. But there's Copy AI, there's Jasper, there's a bunch of new upstarts. And the reason why they keep getting funded is the market's so big. But you have to acknowledge that fact, that both it's a big market and you have to address the fact there's other people in it. But these are just 5 examples. You know, feel free to rip these off shamelessly. A lot of people do, that's great. But you need to find your story. And you need to start thinking about your pitch deck as a story. If you'll notice, every one of these pitch decks has almost everything you need to get yourself a meeting. Because remember, a pitch deck isn't supposed to tell your whole story. It's supposed to be self-contained enough that it tells me the story of how you're getting to $100 million and that I want to take a meeting.
We have a question from Emma.
Yeah, I have a question also about the Eureka moment. So if the team is able to find a problem that everyone else in the market is doing it wrong, and does the competition slide really matter? I don't see a competition bullet point under this structure.
It depends on your story, right? It depends on your market. There's a lot of nuance. These are just literally set up to get you to thought start. It'll be highly dependent on you and your business. And also be highly dependent on the market feedback, right? If you take it to VCs and they ask you about competition every time in the first meeting, it should probably be there. If you take it to VCs and they don't ask that till the second or third meeting, then you don't need it. And that's for a second and third meeting. I can't know your business, right? Like one of the worst things I ever experienced as a founder in my 18 years of doing it was VCs that always pretend to know my business after 45 minutes. It's like, dude, I spend like 60 hours a week doing this. It doesn't mean I know everything, but like I've thought of this very basic thing. Only you will know. I don't know. Okay. But you have to listen to the market. So it could be possible it's totally unnecessary. It could be possible that it's totally necessary. And it could be somewhere in between where some people want it and some people don't.
Thank you.
I don't know. Other questions on this stuff? Okay, so we're not going to do it live, but an exercise you should all do coming out of this is do what I just did for these with your business. And if you can't do it in like 60 seconds or less, if you can't tell the beginnings of that myth, and these, by the way, are the beginnings of all those myths in the Valley. These are the beginnings of that story that we're gonna tell. So you're myth making a little bit, but that's what great founders do. So you should be able to tell yourself and others around you that story. It's like, tell me what you do. It's like, I was sitting around, I was working at my last job at Microsoft, and I just realized the way we handled partner distribution channels was wrong. And I was sitting there one day and I was like, what if we just did X? And I couldn't get it out of my head. So I just started building it. And you know what? The way we're doing it is really different. We've already got like 5 customers. It's like a $30 billion market. I recruited, the former engineer number 6 from Hopin, and we're out raising a seed round. Like, that's a 30-second story, and you're gonna have to fill in a bunch of stuff, but you need to get so comfortable with your story that you can do that. That is what great fundraisers do. And then you're never uncomfortable with it because you're just telling a story. You can do deck, you can do no deck, you can do it in an elevator, you can do it on stage, you can do it anywhere because you're just repeating the story that is true for you. Okay, so going back, we're going to pick a narrative framework. I gave you 5. There's a ton of them. Make your own that is authentic to your business. And again, that narrative framework is telling me why you are the right team and people to get to $100 million in the market you're in within 7 years. Okay, awesome. Now we're going to build the case. We have to prove every statement we make. By laying out a statement proof point, and then the impact, there's a lot less room for disagreement. For those of you that have fundraised before, we've all been there when like a VC will just stop us and then just start yelling about one of our slides. That's how pitch decks, that's how things like break apart, because you lose trust, you lose your ability to keep on message, which you really want to do. So you want to prove what you say. There's a couple ways to prove things that work. Third-party validation. So in the question I got asked, a customer's third-party validation. It's not fair for you to be like, customers love it. Instead, have a customer saying, I love it, with a name, someone that they could go to validate if they needed to. Math. VCs respect math. If you're giving us a market size and no one's actually done the math, do the math yourself. Be like, look, we have 2 customers paying us $1,000 a month. We went through the phone book or Ask ChatGPT or whatever your method is, and there's 35 million other people like that. And if they each paid us that amount, it would create this revenue opportunity. The other one is anecdotal events. Like, if there's competitors, someone's like, well, what about your competitors? Like, it was really interesting. I was just pitching BMW the other day and they're going to buy it. They got a pilot, and let me tell you how they're thinking about it. That's a much better way than as a founder being like, I think, because of course you think, you put everything on the line to start a company. Of course you believe in it. And we respect that, but we want outside validation because our job is to pick between the 100 founders that come to us a week and make one investment. So help us. So for market size, which is the one that I see a lot of founders fail on, do a top down, be like, Gartner says that, this market is growing 11% a year, and then also have bottoms up based on what customers are paying now if you've got customers. But make sure you're building the case. And subjective words like, we love it, we have product market fit, those just don't mean anything. Instead of saying like, we have product market fits, like we're at $1 million in ARR growing 10% month on month. Do not leave room for subjectiveness. Different words mean different people, and VCs, look, there's a group of VCs that are argumentative, and there's some arrogance that comes with success and position, and just, you don't want to be in that spot. If you can avoid it, and you probably can. Okay, any questions on building the case?
Is it safe to expect that part of your deck to be the hardest part?
Not really, actually, because really in your deck, there's not going to be so many places where your vision is your vision, your market size, you have to validate, your traction has to be true. And then like for your like, why now, it's not that hard to find someone if you're on a big societal shift or there's real reasons in the market to do it. It's not that hard to be like, software is eating the world, market entry. It's not that hard to find something. I think the hardest part of your deck is nailing the narrative, in my view. I think everything else flows from that. Not easily, but much more easily than everything else. Once you start thinking in narrative, it becomes clear where everything goes.
And
But there's not
basically,
gonna be that many points where you build, where you have to prove it, really.
got it.
Any other questions on build the case? Okay, check the boxes. No one tells you this, and I don't know why, but these are the boxes that VCs, early stage VCs, and every VC is different, but every single VC needs to believe in these 4 things. I've yet to find a VC to contradict this, which is pretty impressive because we're a contradictory bunch. They need to believe in the market. They must be a clear and believable $1 billion plus market top down, and the biggest funds usually need $10 billion plus. It doesn't need to be there today. Small and growing is totally fine, but there needs to be a big market because we have to believe we can get to $100 million in revenue. If it's not $1 billion plus market, how are you going to do that? You're not going to have all the dollars in the market. So think in terms of 100 million ARR, which is, like used to be IPO. We'll see what happens with market conditions, which is how VCs think about stuff, and then being able to 5x that. That is venture scale markets. And so if you need to think of adjacent markets, if you need to think of anything else, if you go out with less than that in a venture market, it is unlikely to nearly impossible to raise money. So make sure that that's covered off. Team, they have to think you're great. This is pretty obvious, but it's going to be a combination of experience, skills, and how you interact during the pitch. There's also a bunch of stupid fake rules here that some VCs have that no one tells you. Like one of them is VCs want you to email them back that day in general. They somehow, there's Twitter threads that some people think that correlates positively to good founders. I think that's nonsense, but it doesn't matter what I think because they might. So a lot of ways to reinforce your grade is all the little stuff I've been talking about and Dave's been reinforcing, right? All the little things about not just the deck, but you. Do you show up in time? Are you calm? Are you well lit? Is your Wi-Fi there? Are you doing this from a cafe? Don't. You know what I mean? You're asking a stranger for $1 million, Starbucks ain't the spot. And then how you're highlighting your team's experience. If you're like me and you started a company really young, I didn't really have any experience. So what were the things that I was going to have to prove in the room that I was worth taking a chance on? And I was going to have to prove by my output that I could handle it. And that I was willing to hire people older and more mature than me who knew a lot more than I did and listen to them. So you need to think through really what needs to be true for them to believe in you. You obviously believe in yourself because you're a founder, that's great, but that's really important. Founder market fit. So being great actually isn't enough. You need to be the perfect founders for the problem you're solving and the company you're building. So I may or may not be a good founder, but if I was building a DevOps platform, that would be weird because I'm a terrible engineer. I haven't coded in 20 years and I don't know anything about engineering anymore. So if I was I'm going to be an evangelist for developers everywhere. It's dude, you don't do that. You don't know anything about that. Why are you starting this company? That doesn't even make sense. So what's your founder market fit? And it could be your insight. It could be your personal connection to the problem. It could be your skill set, but why you, why now needs to be answered. And so we need to think through why would you be the CEO of a big winner in this space? And if there's no clear answer, you must have a clear answer. You started the company, so make sure that's surfaced. Again, no one tells you that these are the boxes that mentally need to be checked. Every VC is checking these boxes. The last one is thesis. So you're going to tell them a vision, and your vision is going to be, in the future, everyone will be riding on automated floating skateboards. We're going to be the company to provide them. Fine. They have to believe in your thesis. Let me be actually, no, everyone won't be riding on floating skateboards. They'll be riding on floating scooters and have exoskeleton wing, whatever. But they need to believe in your thesis. But most importantly, you need to be clear what your thesis is. What is your thesis about you as a very large business? If you can't articulate that, then we can't articulate it, and it's really hard to get there. So you're going to, just to review, and then I'll take some questions. We're going to pick a narrative framework. We're going to build the case. We're going to fill in the narrative framework. We're going to build the case. We're going to make sure that these boxes are checked, right? Market, team, founder, market fit, thesis. And then we're going to iterate relentlessly because we're going to do this. And then we're going to go start asking, we're going to go to Startup Garage and be like, can I get feedback? We're going to go to people we know and be like, can I get feedback? We're going to go to our first couple of pitch practices and get feedback. And we're going to iterate, because if 4 people in a row are like, I'd love to hear about your competition, or they're like, I don't get it, or they're like, that number seems wrong, then you need to change the way you're presenting it, because you are going to have to iterate relentlessly. Most of our founders have to take 40+ meetings to successfully raise a round, and they're going to have to iterate a great many times. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Anything on those questions?
To clarify, what are we iterating relentlessly? Is it the market team or
Your deck. Once you put together your deck, just go out and show people in the friend zone first, the friendlies, but just keep iterating. Get feedback from other founders, get feedback from other operators, get feedback from angels, get feedback from Startup Garage. Just keep iterating. A lot of times I see founders and they're just like sold on what they built. There's no founder I've ever met, and including like some of our mentors here at Forum, like, you know, Nick Mehta, who sold his company for $1 billion, who have ever nailed a pitch deck first get. It's just not a thing. It's too hard. You need feedback. Like it's impossible. It's literally impossible.
Thank you.
Okay. So any other questions on kind of those major points? Okay, awesome. So we're going to build the case. We're going to check the boxes. The other thing is keep it simple. Your deck is the trailer to your movie. There's this big founder thing where you want to tell everyone everything all at once because you're so proud of what you built and you're so excited. And also you guys all have expert syndrome. You're experts in your space. We're not. But it's all I'm trying to do in your pitch deck is really just figure out if these 4 things are true so I can take a meeting. So the interest of your pitch deck is just to spark interest to get a meeting. You can add nuance and wow them during your presentation. Don't over-explain. I don't need 3 pages of how your product works because it doesn't matter to me. I'm not your customer. I'm not really going to know if it's a good product or not. The way I'm going to know is if I do a demo, which if I really like your thing, I'm going to do. But the real way I'm going to do is if your customers like it, because I'm not your customer. So it's just a trailer to your movie. Don't over-explain your product. Again, in your first meeting, yes, it matters what your product is, but a lot of founders, myself included, who have product backgrounds, you're really proud of the thing you built, and you should be. And the thing you built matters a lot to your customers. It's actually how you generate value. But what your pitch deck is actually it's an investment deck. It's explaining the investment opportunity. Your product is actually a lot more of your customer value than your investment opportunity. So the market environment, team, vision. Also, don't use buzzwords or jargon from inside your space unless you're pitching to VCs in your space. It's really easy to get acronym heavy, assuming we know what you're talking about. If you're not sure, ask. But like if you're in construction tech and you're pitching to someone in construction tech, then yeah, jargon away, you're talking to an insider. But if you're talking to someone like me who's a generalist, odds are you know 100x more about your space than I do, 1000x. I don't even know. Like I have no idea what you're talking about. And then understand what matters. What are the top things that are going to drive significant value for everyone? Any questions on that? So keeping it simple. Again, this is just the trailer to your movie. So like 10, 12 pages. Again, the average VC first pass is 98 seconds. The average for decks that are read even multiple times is less than 3 minutes. Again, courtesy of DocSend. The data is the data. Questions on this? All right, deck design. So you need it professionally designed, full stop. And to Dave's point about colors and backgrounds and little things, unless you're a professional designer, you're not. You're asking strangers for hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. It's the equivalent of putting on nice clothes before a meeting or a date. It just creates the impression that you have your stuff together. And it's a little thing that like, we're not even conscious. I'm not sitting there judging your design, but if it's really bad, I'm just like, well, if they can't execute on a deck, what else can't they execute on? Also, there is a strong positive correlation between deck design and whether or not you've got decent UX on your product. because probably at this stage, you're the person making that decision if you're not doing it yourself. If you can't design a deck, how are you going to design a good product? Get it designed. You can get it designed for $500 on Fiverr. You don't need these fancy agencies that charge 20 grand, but you do need it designed. It shows that you care about your brand and you're in the right position to be selling customers. If you're B2C, your brand is everything, even now B2B. Unfortunately, that does not mean using an AI tool like Beautiful AI. It's not good enough. It's good enough to do your iterations. When you get to VCs, do it. And again, $500 goes a long way here. I know market's hard. A lot of us are out of school. I've been there like when I was like literally, counting dollars to fill up the gas tank. I know being a founder sucks. I know any dollars might be out of pocket. I know. Do it anyway. Okay, a few things to avoid. Sorry, guys, 1 second. Excuse me, a few things to avoid. So this isn't an exhaustive list, but here are some common mistakes to avoid. So remember, your pitch deck exists to tell a story and land an investment meeting, not secure an investment. In our data from Forum and the couple hundred we do in the last 2 years, it takes about 5 to 6 meetings on average to secure an investment. Your pitch deck is literally just the first meeting. And then maybe if they bring you back and you have to like pitch to a bunch more partners, you're doing it again, but you're not telling them everything. So it's just a story to land an investment meeting. So investment is secured over multiple touch points. So for your first pitch deck, here's some things to avoid. Don't make it more than 10-ish pages. 12, fine. If you're 18, you're over explaining by a lot. Because again, you're just telling a story. Do not speak negatively about competitors, legacy. Here's a big one I get all the time. Someone will be like, the legacy providers suck. Workday is terrible. And like, yeah, like Workday is really hard to use. I've used it. Workday is the second most successful SaaS business of all time after Salesforce. Don't speak in those terms. Instead say, Workday has left some room for disruption in these ways because they're not focusing on these things, or users are reporting X. And again, don't have it come from you, have it come from users. Or the data says, or G2 crowd, anything that's not you guys speaking negatively. Same thing, don't speak if your last startup failed and you were the, head of growth, don't, unless it was like you were at FTX, and then in which case like fire away, but you know what I mean? Like don't, it just reflects poorly on you. This is a job interview. Don't do that. Do not leave your vision unclear. It's the hardest part of all of this. Practice in 2 to 3 sentences saying what your company looks like. And the mental model I used to use for this is, let's pretend you just IPO'd, you just rang the bell at the NASDAQ or at, whatever, the New York Stock Exchange. And then you're going on CNN or BNN or Fox News or Fox Business. What are the 2 sentences that I introduce you, or the anchor introduces you, that say what your company does? That's your vision. And understanding you're far away from that vision right now, that's the big vision that VCs tend to grab onto. 2 to 3 sentences, plain English. I've already said this one: poor design, unproven points. I shouldn't have to say typos, but the fact that it's here means that I've seen deck with typos. It's sloppy. I know you're busy. The best thing to do with that one, by the way, to make sure the English makes sense, is get someone in your life who actually doesn't know anything about tech. My favorite used to be like, I have people in my orbit who are literal English teachers, and just get them to edit it because they don't understand tech. But if they can't read it, they'd come back and be like, what are you talking about? I'm like, right, got it. Like, I hate to say, like, your mom is good for this, literally. Lots of product. Again, we need 1 or 2 slides explaining the solution. Don't go over 15 minutes in a first meeting. We want lots of time for questions. That's where your expert's going to shine. Your experts. When I ask you a question about your market, you're going to be like, all these things, most of which I've never heard of or thought of, because you're an expert and I'm not. And don't assume we have knowledge, unless it's a space that we've clearly invested in. And if you're not sure, ask. Just be like, hey, do you know about X? Again, we're touching so many things and you guys know so much and you're so smart. We don't know. And so, don't assume that we're idiots. Obviously, we know the basics, but feel free to ask, try to avoid acronyms. Yeah. Any questions on that?
I think the lack of questions is just because this is so good. Thank you, Jonah. Continue, please.
Yeah, so that's kind of it, right? We're kind of at the end there. I'll stop for kind of more general questions, but like I said, the key takeaways here are very much you're telling a story, and the story is about you. It needs to be authentic to you, so you can tell it on an elevator, so you can tell it comfortably to any VCs. You're going to check all those boxes. You're going to make it clear why this is an amazing VC opportunity that's going to get to 100 million bucks. And we're going to avoid those simple mistakes. And then, we're going to listen to Tom Ford on lighting. We're going to put on our nicest t-shirt and we're going to go raise some money.
Wow. Anyone have any questions for Jonah before we give him like a standing ovation?
I've got a question. Jonah, awesome presentation. How worthwhile is it to incorporate any story pre-COVID? So we were in business back then, things were booming. We, like many companies, got hit pretty hard. Things are certainly picking up, but they're in different ways. But there's a big question of like, can we tell that booming story back then in the companies we were working with back then, or is that dwelling too much on the past?
Yeah, you can do that. So it's a proof point, right? So like your narrative could be like, we were booming and then the music stopped, but the band's playing again and look at this graph. But again, you don't need to like, again, I just said that in 9 seconds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where founders really get lost, is like, you're telling a story. So it's like, we were booming graph because you're building a case, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were growing 30% month over month. And then COVID, and everyone was like, all right. And it's like, you crashed, but like it opened back up again and the traction is building again. So my company Limelight was an event marketing platform. So COVID live event marketing platform. So COVID was awesome. And our revenue crashed from like millions in ARR to less. And then we were like running out of money because of the last sentence I said. And like, so Ross, I congratulations on weathering it through founder to founder. Not fun, not easy. I understand the sleepless nights and the tough choices you had to make. I think VCs in general will appreciate the survivor bias. You just have a harder why now to tell than other people. I am also starting to see, just anecdotally, investments start to pick up in things like this, because the belief is now the pandemic is, like, without getting into the politics of it, that the pandemic is over from an investment perspective. So I think that that's a credible investment narrative, depending on how you tell it. But if it's like graph, and then it stopped, but it's coming back again, graph, I think that that's a reasonable way, if you can, successfully thread that needle.
Awesome, thanks.
Other questions?
Someone asked in the chat whether it's appropriate for an investor to ask for a GitHub link.
They want to see your code? That's
Tamara, if that's how you pronounce it, you guys can elaborate on the question.
Yeah, so it's not typical in due diligence. Like, do you have a term sheet? If you don't, like, look, if you've got a term sheet and it's for, a meaningful amount and they want to do that as part of a due diligence checklist, sure. But pre-term sheet, without knowing the specifics, I would say that that's highly non-standard. It's on their, oh, sorry. They want to see a GitHub link. Okay, so that's different. They want to see what your portfolio is and what you've built. Yes, that is totally reasonable. If you're a developer or you're doing a developer-led product, they want to see your technical chops. Seeing what you've built in the past is reasonable. They're not asking for your Git repo for your product code. They're just asking to see what you've committed over your lifetime of Git. That's almost like a LinkedIn thing for developers. That is reasonable if that's what they asked, in my view. And that's why we do that sometimes. If we're like evaluating CTOs, we'll just go over to Git and see, like, especially if it's like an open source project, they're like, I love open source. And then you go to the Git and they've like never worked on a project on Git. And you're like, do you though? So yeah, I don't think that's crazy unreasonable depending on the product. And obviously they're asking for like your Git repo as it relates to the product. That's super non-standard and would have me asking follow-on questions for sure. I don't know if that's helpful.
Any other questions? While you guys think, I would just like to do what I always do at the end of an Oceanside chat, is tell you about our next Oceanside chat. I don't know if you can see my screen, but next week and the following week, we'll have a two-part series on marketing and branding. A friend by the name of Benjamin Fidlack will be joining us. He's a first-time Oceanside chat friend, and so we're really excited to welcome him. So just a reminder, you can RSVP. Jonah, before we let you go, is there any parting words you can say, something that can really kind of seal this moment? Or, you know, if actually, is there another, how about, there's a question in the chat. How about valuation? Is there a best practice to come up with a post valuation?
So valuations are made up at early stage. They're entirely made up. They have no basis in fact. They have no basis in reason. Early stage valuations are falling fast. I would say in this market, I wouldn't be too precious about your valuation. And I'd have to know specifics, but oftentimes I'll see founders who have no one committed being like, we're raising 2 on 10. It's like, maybe. No one's committed yet. Like that requires 2 parties to agree. So you're hoping to raise 2 on some valuation, but yeah, I would much more lean towards, we need X money to get to Y milestone. We need $1 million to get to $1 million ARR. We need $1 million to get to our first 10,000 customers. We need $1 million to file for our next 6 patents and get the US Air Force approval. Dollars to milestones. And then it's a conversation about what those dollars are worth to the VC and you. Or you can be like, we need a minimum $1 million that gets us to here. But if we had $2 million, we could get to here. And then you're in range land. In down markets, I was a CEO in 2001. I was a baby and it was a small company, but whatever. I was a CEO in 2008. I was a CEO in 2020. When the market is bad, flexibility is the order of the day. And, you know, check your pride. What your company was worth a year ago is not what it's worth now. That has nothing to do with you. That doesn't change the statement of fact.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's really hard.
It's really hard. Okay, well, one of these days, Jonah, we're going to get you out to the actual garage. You're going to be on the west side. We'll host you properly. We'll feed you. You'll be able to meet the teams and things like that. But until then, you know, we look forward to seeing you virtually. Jonah also joins us for our VC Angel Office Hours program at the Viterbi Startup Garage. He's been such a great resource to us. I cannot thank you enough for all of the time you give to us, knowing how busy you are helping all of these businesses do what they do. So thanks again for joining us.
Thanks.
And yeah, hope to see you guys all next week and the following week for our Oceanside chat on marketing and branding. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Jonah.